Welcome to another episode of On the Backhash Perc Talk. My name is Cedric. I'm joined with Will, and we have not one but two special guests with us today. From City Mystique, we have, I believe, Dr. Matt Jordan, correct? No. And Mr. Dean. I almost called you Dean Smith because I'm on Carolina right now.
not Dean Smith.
How's everybody doing?
Good.
Sid, you're in that mode.
Yeah. Listen, man.
The brain is everywhere. You're in band mode.
It's okay. All good. It's all good. But I know last year we had an episode where we got with Dean and we talked about Mystique show from last year, and we thought we'd do it again. And this time, Matt decided to join us. So before we kind of get into the video and talk about that, Matt, can you tell us like what you do with Mystique and who you are and what all you do and all that stuff?
Yeah, so I'll give the short version. So currently in my regular life, I'm associate professor of percussion at Jacksonville State University in Alabama, and then the Fern Ensemble arranger for Mystique, and I have been since 2014. And then in drum corps, I work with the Blue Coats as a music producer and sound designer.
That's awesome.
Nice.
So just everywhere. Nice. So, and then Dean, just for those that may not know who you are, let's know about you.
Yeah, so in the band sphere right now, I just work with Mystique in the winter season. I've worked with some other drum corps and stuff like that in the past, but Mystique's my main gig right now. I serve as a front ensemble caption head. And yeah, outside of that, I roast coffee. So I live in Chattanooga. Those are some quick facts.
There you go. I still need to get some of that coffee from you, man.
Yeah. Usually I'll bring like a half gallon or a gallon of cold brew concentrate to rehearsal weekends. And so that it helps our ears focus, it kind of helps turn them on.
I'm trying to say, how much of that coffee does Ben Lupton drink? Because that dude...
None. No, he doesn't. He drinks a lot of coffee, but that's unfiltered. You can't replicate that.
Funny.
Are y'all too close to each other, living wise?
Yeah, well, so he lives in Nashville. So we used to be pretty close when I lived in Nashville, as far as like just we would drive over, see each other, hang out a lot like that. But yeah, now in the different cities. So
because it would be cool. Sitting here thinking, I was like, man, next time I get on a plane, I come home back to Kentucky. We should all pick up Sid. We all drive down there in Nashville and just chill. Talking about getting some coffee or something. We should hook that up for real.
Yeah.
Sure.
Oh yeah. Yeah, we're a big coffee loving group. So if you got a coffee date in mind, let us know.
Sure. We'll work it out.
We're trying to make that.
Our goal right now is we're trying to get the DCI finals. Well, at least I am.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
Nice.
But it's rough, man. Ever since I made the move, them plane tickets ain't cheap.
No, they're not.
It's like, God, dog, bro. Because Texas is cheaper than it is here. It's ridiculous. It don't make sense. How can you leave Texas?
Where are you at now, Will?
I'm about, theoretically, I'm supposed to be 40-ish minutes from Seattle. Realistically, I'm like an hour and a half.
Got it.
Traffic bad.
Yeah, those are expensive plane flights from Seattle to
coming out of
SeaTac, Seattle to Nashville.
It's ridiculous. Yeah. It's ridiculous. But yeah, I'm closer up north. I'm maybe 3 hours from Canada. I'm not that far.
Oh wow.
So yeah, but I love it. I love it, man. It's so nice. It's always an experience. I'm learning something new literally every day. I feel like
the air is cleaner there as well.
Ridiculously clean.
Yeah. It's nice.
For sure going to make it up there at some point. You up there and I got some more family up there, so we're going to make it happen.
Right? Come on up, man. Let's get it.
All right. So we're going to get into this. We're going to watch a video from this past season from World Championships, and we're going to let you guys just chime in when you hear stuff or interesting moments and things of that nature. But really dug the show this year. It's a very Mystique show, and I think they did it that way. And I don't think other people could duplicate that type of show and make it work the way that you guys do. So I'm just going to get right back into it. For those at home watching on YouTube, you can follow the link in the description below to the video. That way you can hear it without us talking over it and all that good stuff. But I'll give a countdown, and then we'll get started. So starting from triple zeros, we'll go in 3, 2, 1, play.
Presenting their program, The Red Line, WGI Sport of the Arts is proud to present Music City Mystique.
Bro, this show's so fantastic. I'm sorry. Go get it out the way.
Yeah, this was a really fun year for sure, and a super solid group. One of the best top to bottom groups we've had in years.
That's amazing.
Saturating their minds and sabotaging their future. A contributing factor to our juvenile delinquency today.
I know what she never missed, boy.
Yeah, Cammy was pretty solid.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
A true detriment to society. Some of the heavy metal stuff is really satanic.
It looks real good against the backdrop.
Yeah.
I will say that.
Set design was very well thought out.
Yeah, Shane's always got a pretty good eye for that, I feel like.
Absolutely.
And right then, when y'all started playing the quote of Igor's Ride, or not Igor's Ride, but Minsky, I knew right then where the show was going. Like, right at spring started.
And that was really the goal. It's like right off the bat, you know, we kind of have that quote of like gangster rap has been a detriment to society.
Yeah.
But then you go into something from over 100 years ago that incited riots. You know, just knowing we've been experiencing music like this for hundreds of years.
Yeah. There's a lot of nice little Easter eggs musically in there as well.
I love stuff like that.
It is. I kept trying to tell folks all season. I'm like, bro, y'all missing this show for real.
Kind of talking about that, the Rock This Way was from DMC and Aerosmith. I remember that as a kid being like, those two groups combined together?
Exactly. Yeah, and this moment coming up, like, I remember this was one of the things that CJ and I were a little hesitant about at first, but man, it turned out to be one of the best parts of the show, the Elvis Hound Dog quotes.
Yes.
Because like Shane really wanted to use it as the visual inspiration of all the kind of body stuff. And just, it turned out so well.
I just do whatever I feel on stage.
It was nice to have a visual reference in the artistic realm as well.
They did so good.
Yeah. Well, the other interesting thing is like that Hound Dog thing. I think it's a Doja Cat song. Like it actually has the Hound Dog thing that drops down that octave again.
I was wondering. I was like, because man, who made this sound effect? I was like, when it drops off Hound Dog, I was like, okay, Mystique, I see y'all.
And for flavor, it just feels nice.
Yeah.
And then we have the NWA reference right here.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Well, and like that was another interesting thing where we tried to make the bleeps start turning into the important thing,
right?
You know, and you start morphing that. Just such a cool concept, and was happy with how that turned out.
Constantly, whether there are sounds or silences.
Yeah, and then John Cage, 433 reference here.
And I'm so glad the audience figured it out throughout the season.
Yeah,
semifinals night we had some. Yeah, semifinals night we had some bold people, and then this was really nice because the audience started screaming with us.
Oh,
yeah, which was cool.
Oh, the audience was in this show all the way.
They were still very respectful of the silence after it. By the way, this is Carter. We gotta go.
Dude, this transition into this song.
Yeah. This was one of the strongest moments of the show. Just from
I was like, dude, that crescendo into her singing. That's goosebumps for me every time.
Well, it's just the magic of that noise and then back to the silence. It's so cool.
Oh, they ate this.
Yeah. That's classic Mystique right there.
Dude, I watched that on Finals Run. I was like, bruh, they ate that.
Such a powerful battery form there in the back.
Halftime march forward, just accentuating that.
Yeah. You will not see that from Shane very often either. They're not usually going like slow, steady. It's a lot of running.
Yeah.
Dude, those I couldn't get over the audio, man. It's so good.
Yeah, CJ's did a fantastic job this year setting up me and Shane and everyone for success.
Yeah.
CJ's amazing. The visual ensemble goes crazy in this next part.
Yeah.
I love this part of the show.
And I'd highly recommend, if you haven't checked out, so Mark Applebaum is the name of the composer. That's from a TED Talk he did that's really fantastic, a 15-minute long TED Talk.
Okay.
But really a lot of the things with the show and the concept came from that Mark Applebaum TED Talk.
Nice.
I don't think people understand how hard that is to line up.
Yeah.
That was very hard. We can talk about that once the show's done.
Yeah.
Heavy metal
Dude.
stuff is really satanic.
Old girl in the
Anthony
middle
shreds.
prop. Look. Every time I watch it, his eyes, dude.
This was my
She's
favorite
whipping
part of
his
the
hair.
show. Yeah.
Me too. Me too,
Yeah.
Dean. Yeah.
Is
Dude,
this,
it's
is
clean,
this
bro.
like semi-class?
So clean.
Yeah.
Here's its skip. Yeah, heavy.
Yeah. A palpable energy for
yes.
sure.
Yeah.
Wasn't in your face. It was what it needed to be.
Exactly.
Metric modulations all over the place.
Things to leave the doors open so everybody else can follow.
Which that message, I think, is an epitome of what Mystique does. I think you guys open the door to say, we can do this concept.
Because I'm pretty,
Josh Wilson.
bruh, I'm pretty sure when we was watching this, or a lot of us, because, you know, Cedric was there,
Yeah.
but a lot of us was messages. We got our little group chat going on, and a lot of us, and I know I put it in a message. I was like, that has to be like the first standing ovation of the night.
It was.
And I'm sitting here like,
Yeah.
this is the cleanest run out of all the times I've seen y'all this season. I was like, if you want to talk about doing it on the right night,
Yeah.
and I just knew, and then everything came apart, and then okay, the scores, and the placements.
That's jazz, baby.
I think
That's
the important
jazz.
thing is, like, don't get me wrong. You know, we love scores to be, you know, what they are, but I think that the most important thing is what we feel like coming out of that tunnel.
And
There's been years where we've gotten medals where it was like, man, that wasn't a good run, you know. And then there was years like this year where, like, we walked out, I was like, that was freaking awesome. Like, the members crushed it. It was the best run of the year. It's like, that's all that matters. It's like, we can't control the rest of it. You know, there's only so much we can do on the rest of it. But, like, I think it was really the culmination of, like, one of the strongest years Mystique's had, not recently, but just in ever. And so felt really good about the show, felt good about the members, felt good about all that stuff. I'm sure Dean can talk more about that too.
Yeah, I think the kids felt really good coming up the tunnel on finals night. We were pretty all, you know, happy with how the run went. It felt like a crescendo throughout the week for our performances. So
Yeah.
can't be mad with how it ended, at least.
Yeah, that's, you know.
And yeah,
Oh, sorry.
I was gonna say it was just nice having that much energy and kind of, I don't know, it felt like a crowd connection between the ensemble and the audience. I didn't get to watch anybody else's inside, but I know I've heard some other people say, like, yeah, that felt like there was a noticeable pop of energy from the crowd when you guys finished your performance. So it's cool to hear that.
Yeah, being in there, yes, it was definitely like when you got done. Like I said, it was the first stand to know, and I don't think any other ones. And you guys know I won't. I know y'all. I wouldn't just be saying stuff just to be saying it, but it really, that was probably the loudest one of the night. Just because, we talked about, we use the term sometimes hype show, but like that had some brain behind it, some intelligence behind it. Everything
like big brain
was thought out, and so yes, there were hype moments, but at the same time, there was still that musical content and that brain in it to make it was something for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
It was something for everybody in that show.
Because
I would say like last year's show and this year's show are both pretty intellectual, but this is like a very accessible intellectual show. Mm-hmm. Like people can grasp onto the music at least.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I think the most interesting thing is like it's so hard to do intellectual and something that can be recognized that easily.
Right.
And I think that we really did hit a really great balance of pop culture and intellectualism and, emotional connection and all that triad, that triad of effect that we try to aim for. So yeah, I was again really happy with how the show ended up, just from an overall design and performance standpoint.
Yeah. It was really
Did y'all
cool.
get any?
Go ahead. Do it.
I was just wondering. I was like, did y'all get any weird comments from any judges? Like like anybody not understanding anything, or
I'm going to say this in as respectful way as I can.
Yeah,
but there's definitely people who understood the styles that we were playing better than others. Gotcha. If that makes sense.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
There's some people who, and it's not necessarily that they were, doing it out of place of spite or. It was mainly from a place of it's just a world that they're not as familiar with as musicians.
Gotcha.
And so, I think that was the most kind of ebb and flow we got from a commentary standpoint is like the people who really understood, who knew their music history, especially on the pop world enough, really absolutely grabbed onto every moment.
Exactly.
And really true, I won't name names just to kind of avoid talking about judge or anything, but there was a specific judge that sent me a message. It was just and caught everything. I kind of hit all of those points of understanding this is why you did this. This is how this connection works. Mm-hmm. And then there was others who again, still enjoyed it as a work of indoor drumline, but it didn't maybe have those kind of deeper intellectual connections that were intended that some people did pick up for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was talking to my parents about the show, and someone was like, I like it, but I don't really get it. And I was like, so I was explaining to them, well, this is this song. And I was going through all of the songs that they played. And another parent was like, yeah, I caught that. So for me, it was cool to talk to maybe folks that enjoyed the show, but didn't understand it from a conceptual standpoint and explain to them well, this is why all of this stuff is important because, da. And then, so on their second read of it, they were more appreciative of it. So,
yeah. Well, and I think I don't remember which of you pointed it out, but one of the things this was our 30th anniversary. We don't want to do celebratory kind of retrospective shows at all. That's not how we work.
Right.
But one of the interesting things was the show kind of represents what we've always tried to do. I think that it's one of those challenges for us as our organization is that we do tend to try to push the envelope and do different things. Sometimes that's successful, sometimes it's not. Mm-hmm. But the important thing is that we're trying to do things that we're excited about and interested in. And we're not trying to push things because we want to push things. It's just we're finding things that we're excited about and interested in, and we get our inspiration way less from inside the activity as we do from outside the activity. So a lot of the things that we're doing are just things I found these cool little new triggers, or we've messed around with some processing stuff just because we found some cool inspiration for those things, not because it's pushing the limits or pushing the boundaries. Mm-hmm. And I think that's true of all these artists that we played too. Nobody was NWA didn't write Straight Outta Compton because they wanted to push the boundaries of, rap and hip hop. Mm-hmm. They were just doing what they felt was right. They were just writing the songs that they felt were right. All of these people were. And so I think that's why it was an interesting parallel for us to have of, it's not us trying to push the boundaries, it's just us doing us and just that happens to do that sometimes.
Because I got to talking with someone that's like, about designing and stuff like that, and I was like, man, I'm sure that they researched and talked with each other and just went off of their own general knowledge and everything else. Because I was like, man, you're talking about a lot of music, and you're putting quotes and stuff and audio over it, and you're playing certain sounds, and you're doing this, that, and I was like, if you do something or play something and say something the wrong way, you're going to have one demographic to get on. And I used NWA as that idea. I was like, man, they could have done that the complete wrong way, and you would have had a whole section of folks that have been like, y'all, what y'all doing, right? So, and I'm sitting here like, but I was like, man, this, like Seth's been saying all year, this was big brain stuff. This was like a big brain hype show that is needed, and it's sad, when people don't get it fully, or I don't even know how to phrase it, but I was like, I'm sitting here looking at stuff, and I'm like, I just don't get it. I was like, this, and you try so hard to not knock on other groups or shows or anything like that, because everybody is always in this pocket of, we're all doing hard stuff and we're all putting forth good products and stuff like that. And you sit back and it's like, bruh, you're having a really hard time convincing me, man. It's like, and I'm not, and this isn't a bias, it's in me being an alumni. This ain't got nothing to do with it, because I've said stuff like this in the Scholastic world. I've even said stuff like this in like Sedge Group and Scholastic Open Concert. Like, there's just this, like, really? It's like, come on, bro. Are you like, really? So I don't know.
Well, like I said, again, like, would we always love for things to go better competitively, or kind of go our way? Maybe go our way, maybe not better. Go our way competitively, of course. Like, but I think the important thing is it's not that we don't care at all about it. It's not the motivation any of us have to do what we do. So yeah, it can be frustrating sometimes, but all to say, there's only so much we can do about it. And we just got to keep designing shows the way we do, and trying to be smart about the risks and the exposures and the skill sets that we're featuring in a way that's still us. And I think that's the biggest thing we have to keep doing, is just being us, finding smart ways to be us in a variety of ways.
Dean, what kind of challenges, teaching this madman's book did you come across throughout the season?
Like, you want them to play what?
We did have a decent amount of split stuff this year. So we just had to get our split kind of process down. I think that was probably the most consistent thing that we had to figure out, was just how to balance for some of those moments musically. I think we talked about it last year on the podcast, because there was a section of the show last year that was similar, but there's an echoing effect where pod 1 plays and then pod 2 plays like a beat or so later. Pod 3 plays another beat or so later. And a lot of the music is verbatim stacked on top of each other. So, I'm sure you had to take some time, Matt, and make sure that everything fit well and sat well and sounded good. But then when we try to do basically a Mannheim crescendo where we add these people in, but also do a decrescendo across the ensemble, having to figure out how to balance that is something that we had to kind of play around with. The 9-lit run and the Nina Simone, up until the weekend before finals, we were still tapering some of those dynamics. And I think we ended up in a good spot, because it's this big unison 16-note run with all the woods. And then we start the 9s splitting. So some downs and some ups, 3 downs, 3 ups. And just trying to figure out how to make that sound good and also get to a satisfying finish musically. I think those were probably the biggest things that we kept spending time on. And then it's a choppy book. I think maybe it's a different type of choppy, because when we do have a choppy exposed window, it's if it's dirty, it's going to be super clear. It's opened up, it's exposed. You can hear exactly what they're playing. And then going into the support mode and playing some of that kind of some of the most familiar pop melodies and lines that are in the show, or the popular music, kind of quotes. We would play some of that play it chill in the background, and then like start throwing hands. So balancing those two kind of like speeds, that gear shift. But yeah, I don't know, Matt. What about you? What did you think was tough for this year?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think the amount of sequential things, like you're kind of talking a little bit about that, but like there's a lot of things that were like just player 1 to player 2 to player 3 to player 4 to player 5 to player 6, where I don't typically write that way, and it's just, there was a lot of things this year that kind of called for that it was either from a visual standpoint, it needed to create momentum from one side of the floor to the other, or from inside out. It was just, there was a lot more requests from Shane and what he wanted to do visually to have those kind of things create that kind of momentum. So that was a little bit of a learning curve for me. And a lot of that comes from like, we normally kind of stack mallets, which we still did a lot of the point where like, you have harder players on the inside, medium hard, medium on the outside. But the problem is when you have the sequential that starts on the outside, how do you keep an even voicing kind of all the way across the ensemble? And so we had to be a lot smarter, and there's, I think, a lot more mallet changes to solve those issues than we would normally do. Because although the players were all across the keyboard, it wasn't like outer players being mostly bass marimba like I typically would write. There's still moments of that. But yeah, I think there was that. And then I think the other difficulty for us from a compositional standpoint, like first I want to say CJ did a fantastic job. CJ's our composer and sound designer. So he kind of lays out the show structurally. And so he's the one who kind of did the hardest work of taking all of these different little snippets and ideas and kind of trying to create this unified whole. Really, at this point, I operate more as a front ensemble orchestrator. Like CJ does a great job setting me up for success. And then I have a structure then to kind of work within and deal a lot. Like if you think about it this way, like CJ will lay out more of the melodic and harmonic ideas, like the pacing of the show. And then I'm able to really think a lot more about like, what are the players physically doing? How are we going to orchestrate this marimba part? How are we going to orchestrate this drum set part or these rack parts or synth parts? And that's going to be the thing that like we really divide and conquer on, which is really nice. But yeah, so I think the biggest challenge really was for CJ of taking all of these things that are completely different stylistically, and then putting them together in a way that feels like a unified whole while still representing each style accurately. Because like you're saying, we could easily bastardize one of these things and make people not like us, and that's a challenge. And I think that's the other thing is like, we really tried to pare it down to like, what is the essence of this tune without having to play the tune? What about, and I think that's the hardest part about this is finding what is the thing that makes Hound Dog, like, is it just the melody, which we ended up being, it was just the melody. Like we didn't use anything else from Elvis aside from the ain't nothing but a hound dog. That's really all we used. But you still got the vibe and energy because visually we connected the dots. Rite of Spring, same deal. We didn't ever use a melody from Rite of Spring. We just used the kind of crunchy chords. That's all. That's all we used. But it was just enough to make people go like, "Oh, Rite of Spring, that's it." And that was the goal: is to just give enough to connect into those things throughout the show.
That's awesome. That was worth its weight in gold right there.
Exactly.
So how because of so many like influential musical moments that have had, that has happened through history, how did we narrow it down to those? Because you could easily do a part 2 to this with a completely different set of stuff.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, like, so CJ and I had a playlist on Spotify where we're just trying to put together things that we thought were in that vein. I mean, like, there were some obvious ones, like the Rite of Spring was a very clear, obvious choice right off the bat. We already, from a very early time, had listened to the Mark Applebaum podcast, or like the TED Talk. So, like, we knew we wanted to do something with that. I had brought up people like John Cage, then the Yoko Ono thing, like the screaming thing was really kind of inspired by some of Yoko Ono's kind of work. Where else? I kind of mentioned artists like Frank Zappa. Like there was those kind of artists, like, and those are the ones we didn't not end up including in the show. We didn't have any Frank Zappa. We didn't have some of these things. And so, yeah, it was just really trying to make sure we represented a cross section of some musical styles and ideas. Like a good example is the closer. And this is an interesting thing of like how we write shows too, is like the closer, we kind of knew getting up to the closer that we didn't have as much pit exposure as we wanted kind of earlier in the show. Like that we had kind of designed moments programmatically, but it kind of had boxed us into certain choices musically around those programmatic moments. And so rather than actually using source material for like the heavy metal stuff at the end of the show, is like, let's just write something and that's going to be all original, but in the style of. So rather than trying to squeeze into the box of some particular song or genre, it just let CJ kind of run with it of like, let's just make something that really has a lot of windows of opportunity for the keyboards, and then we can kind of do what we need to finish the show out. And so there was things like that of just us kind of making the style the more important thing rather than a particular song. Like that was kind of what the closer was. And similar, the other interesting thing, and most people don't realize this, the quotes at the end of the show is actually Run DMC. Mm-hmm. That's also like all and the quote's actually bigger. The quote is something like, Dean, you heard it a lot more than I did. What do you remember it off the top of your head, the full version?
No, but I'll look for the score. I'll look for the score and see if it's in there. It was a longer one. I mean, that was another.
We liked the longer version better from a programmatic standpoint, but again, we wanted those keyboard moments. And so we kind of cut down the quote to be as tidy and compact as it could be. But the original quote from Run DMC is amazing and like ties the whole show together.
Because we talked about the Eminem version with the snare part, and y'all trying to get that together.
Yeah, for sure.
He said,
I'll bootleg it, Dean. It's like it's up to those who have accomplished things to knock down doors, break down walls. Break down walls, something else. Knock down doors, and leave the doors open for those to follow. Yeah. But like that's an interview quote from Run DMC, and it just works so well to kind of tie into the show and everything. A lot of the radio interview stuff that we talked. Oh, actually, I think that's where a lot of the stuff came from too. Conceptually, is Frank Zappa doing the congressional hearings. Like Frank Zappa did like a series of congressional hearings when they were trying to institute like the rating system, like the MPAA like rating system for songs and what was explicit lyrics and everything. But Frank Zappa did a really great series of congressional hearings, and that kind of started us on a path of finding news clippings from all of these different types of things. And that's really the inspiration for like the beginning of the show is where we had started with finding these news clippings talking about the stuff that wasn't initially in the show, but as we went through the Frank Zappa stuff, we started leaning into those things more. But yeah, we can talk about the Eminem stuff. Dean, you were around, again, the cleaning part of it more. I can talk about on the front end what we had to think about and plan on, but how was that for y'all?
You're asking the front ensemble person. For that section, I mean, I guess we can talk about the nuts and bolts of it. It is a snare solo. It starts with like the bass drum, of course, and a cymbal small little feature for like a 4 bars, 5 bars maybe. But outside of that, there's no drum set from us. It's one person playing kind of I think it's called Godzilla bass or whatever, the bum, ba-da-dun, dun, dun, dun. Crispin, our sampler player, was playing samples. Originally, that was written as half-note samples. The tempo for that section was 168. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2. But Eminem's rapping all 16th notes. Well, the snares are the ones playing. They're really the source of time in that section as far as like acoustic music. And they come in like towards the back hash, I want to say, when they do enter in. So lining all of that up with half notes was not going to be doable. And then turning around and trying to go to the opposite end and being like, hey, can we split this up into like 8th notes? That's not necessarily going to work either, because you start to hear these gaps in the vocal sample. So we ended up with it just being quarter notes. But even that, it's heavily dependent on the snares playing at 168. And we had to rehearse that section a lot, not because of them, but because of the front to back lineup. And Crispin, this is what the snare solo sounds like. Make sure you know how to play clap quarter notes to the snare solo.
So you're saying each lyric on each sample was a quarter note with 16 with 16 words or syllables.
It was
16th notes worth.
Yeah.
So 4 syllables.
Four syllables for.
Yeah. So we had
the other thing that's worth talking about is that this is the first year where that's legal. They made the rule change last year at the PAB that made it where vocals there's no limits. And so that was one of the things that when we planned on doing that moment, we had that conversation of like, here's what we're going to encounter, because like we're doing the thing that's rhythmically perfect in front of the thing that's rhythmically imperfect. And so we can't listen the way that we want to. It'd be really helpful if we could have speakers behind where the snares were able to listen to the thing that's perfect. Then it would be easy enough to do a single, all right, cool, and we're done. Just play it once. And actually going back, we actually did that in 2018. We actually used in-ear, like click, like metronome stuff in 2018, and it was a huge pain. It was like not fun for anybody. And that was one of the solutions of like, if things get so dire, it's like we do have the capability of putting like in-ears on Cami where we can like just have a solid version that's like all the way through. And then she's just playing what she hears there. And we would just use it for that one part of the show. We already have the gear. We already had the things. But we all wanted to avoid that like the plague. Because we wanted to be able to create a little bit of variation. Like I'd say that within like a four click window, it felt good. If it got much out of that 4-click windows where things started feeling a little bit awkward in either direction. And so that just gave us the possibility of like finals night when they're juicing it a little bit, they don't feel held back by playing with exactly what it is. And that's but the good thing is we're really overall, I think, pretty strong at, we might not know exactly how we're going to end up doing something, but we know about 5 different ways to do it before we actually get on the floor and do it. Like I remember 2017, like all the stuff we did with, moving marimbas around and everything like that. Like if that didn't work with the wireless we planned, we already had 4 or 5 other solutions of plans of how to deal with that. And I think that's the most important thing is when we are trying to do these really wacky out there things, we have thought through all the pros and cons of what's going to happen. What are going to be our trade-offs in this section by doing this? A lot of times the trade-offs are positive, and then what we gain in the negatives doesn't outweigh what we gain in the positives.
Gotcha.
I'd say the only year that I can think of, and I'm sure Dean will agree with this, that I think our negatives outweighed the positives of 2018. There's a lot where and if you go back and watch that show, I still creatively love that show. I still like, and the members did an amazing job with that show, and I think we played really well at the end of the season. But I think that's one that the member experience was diminished because even though we had figured out solutions, those solutions weren't particularly fun to do for the members. And so, yes, we had found ways to kind of solve these problems. But yeah, I think we always are trying to push the envelope of what we are comfortable doing while also considering what the member experience is. And I think we've done a pretty good job of that over the past few years. Really, 2018 is the only year that I feel like we got that balance wrong a little bit.
Yeah, no, it's been pretty solid since then. I feel like in 17, it was definitely... we're doing something that nobody's ever really done before. We've seen different groupings and like pods of pits and stuff like that, but not moving a line of marimbas into different shapes that sets up a different scene for the floor and the environment and stuff like that. So that was a little trial and error. And then 18, similar idea with like using them to kind of set up the space. But with that, then the battery coming in the middle and like moving around and stuff and the in-ears. Well, if you've got these in-ears and we're using like kind of a unionized click that everybody's going off of, but the snares are in the back of the form, the quads are in the front. Now you're introducing like latency to these headphones and these in-ears to dial that in. That was really hard. We had some of the best members in the activity come in, and then we had to like quickly try to train them on this thing that we were trying to train ourselves on as well. So that one was tougher. And then since then, I feel like we've definitely done things that push the boundaries and push the envelope as far as like what we can do as players and as an ensemble. But Nothing that has felt like it's been like, man, this is hard. This is hard to figure out.
Right.
Yeah. I'd be. How often do y'all like have an idea for something and then you'll just sit there like that ain't it?
A lot. Well, and that's the thing. It's like we have to realize that our creative instincts are to do things new and fresh and interesting. But a lot of those involve things that cost a lot of money. You start seeing, things that involve a lot of video screens or a lot of, other elements that start to get way more costly than what we deal with. We do have to kind of limit ourselves and say, like, could we figure out a bootleg way to do this? Yes. But like the thing is, what we've realized is like, that's when we tend to not do great, is when we're trying to figure out the bootleg version to save money. And that's where usually, and I'd say that for everybody, if you look at the groups that use TVs, like I'd say almost all of them had one of the TVs not working
all the time,
on finals night. And a lot of that comes down to people are trying to use consumer grade technology to do something that's in a can't fail mission critical environment. Like your little RCA $150 TV from Walmart ain't going to get you that thing that works every time.
I swear.
And again, that's one of the hard things is like people want the effect of, X number of TVs. But like, if you want to do that and you want it to work every time, you got to go to pro level stuff. What we're using for all of our drums and keyboards are pro level things. What we're using for our audio gear at this point, all pro level things. We're for Sense, we're using redundant, machines that make sure that if one computer fails, the other one's ready to go. Like all that stuff is completely redundant. Power is completely redundant. There's very little things in the pit that aren't redundant in some way that if something failed, we would still be okay.
Wow.
And that's that it still happens in like finals lots or like regional lots where it's like, okay, we're setting up and something weird happened, but we're not stressed because we've got these extra battery backups, or we're not stressed because there's a second computer that can jump in and do the job of the first one if it starts like, hobbling along, which is I love. That makes me feel so less stressed because a lot of the times when it comes to those things, it's an audio, electronic, technological something. And I have a lot of comfort from knowing Eric Robertson, who does a lot of our audio stuff, is there and can troubleshoot quickly and figure it out. And that we've got so many like backup plans, because there's no worse feeling than like getting there and you're like, cool, everybody's been doing great in the lot. Here we go. We get to the show and something immediately weird happens or something out of your control happens. And then you're eating up your time, and then you're stressed, and the kids are a little stressed because you're stressed, and it's a bad trickle effect.
Oh yeah, because I think who was it? I think it was Synagro.
Yeah,
I think theirs cost them like a top 5 or something like that.
It did, yeah. Because and I think that's an important thing, and I won't talk about the specific situation. I'm actually kind of connected to Center Grove in a consulting type of way.
Yeah.
But like that is the important thing, is like you do have to have those backups, because like the time, like it could work every time until finals. Finals is going to be the time that something stops working. So you have to know the troubleshooting. You have to create those opportunities for troubleshooting with your students. Because like, and there's a number of ways to do that, of just making sure you're using the right configuration of things, you're checking things behind the screen, all that stuff. And even when you do that, guess what? Sometimes things aren't going to go your way. And I think that it's also important to know that, like, I wouldn't say at Mystique as much, but like with Blue Coats, like we design shows that like if the electronics didn't work, the show's still really cool. I think there's so many people who design shows where like, man, here's our 45 seconds that nothing else is happening besides electronics. And like I try to avoid that in most of the shows that I write, because of the fact that, number one, it's only 1 or 2 performers out of the ensemble. And if we're kind of putting, a quarter of the show on their importance, that's also meaning that you're essentially having a soloist for a minute and a half of your show. And that's not something we would do when we're orchestrating for the rest of the ensemble. So I try to avoid doing those kind of things. And that's why we've tried to do clever things like the stuff we've done with live processing, like 2019 especially. There's shows that are built on doing creative things to the instruments that people are playing. where rather it being so focused on what somebody did in their studio at home to create beautiful sounding samples,
Right.
that is the icing and the layer on the cake of what the amazing musicians are doing in front of you.
And that's the thing. I think we've said this a lot of times. It's like, man, go ahead, have your audios, have your things and all that, but make sure that the show is still the show. Like, you can still play it. Don't let, the audio part of it be the main focus or be the show, because you're going to have that one day something's going to happen.
Yep. And a lot of my philosophy of that comes from if you fail to plan to fail. There's that thing. And 2015, I mean, we dropped from second to fourth in 2015 because of a TV issue. And I want to be very clear, we didn't drop because of the TV issue. We dropped because we didn't prepare the members well enough for a TV failure.
See.
And the members didn't play well on finals night in 2015.
Yep.
Yeah, because of the TV's not working.
Well, because they start the show every single member of the ensemble looking at the TV that's not working. And that was our GE for that show as well. I mean, not just that, the members were a lot of the GE, but the visuals that go along with, like, there's bees happening and now you're in the desert and you're getting fried by the sun. I think they did let that affect them, which we hadn't had that moment to that degree, I don't think, until finals. And so that was my first finals. That was a weird feeling.
The funny thing is like, we had opposite issues in 2014, 2015. We used TVs both years. 2014 was us figuring out how to do it. And so I don't think we had the TVs work correctly until finals night in 2014. There was always some issue in 2014. And then finals night was like, yes, we did it. And then so we kind of thought that's like there's some other things that I can talk about. But like 2015, from a technological standpoint, we felt we had it pretty figured out, because the things that we figured out in 14, we adopted. And like, so we were consistent, and every show the TVs worked until finals. And so that's the whole thing, like similar with the Center Grove thing, is like when you always have that consistency of it working, you gain that experience troubleshooting. And that means that when things do happen, like, that just makes it harder. Like 2015, our big issue, just kind of looking back, was the height that we made those props at was taller than the tunnel. So we had to keep the TVs turned sideways, and we could only set them up once we got out there, which means we couldn't plug in a computer. We couldn't check anything. 2014, we were able to check behind the curtain and make sure everything was working, and then roll it out together. And so, like, just being smart of like, okay, in the future, if we were to use TVs, like, we're going to make sure everything can be plugged up and set up. Whatever we decide has to be able to be done in one spot where we can check it and have time to troubleshoot. But so the reason I bring that up is 2019, when we had a show that was entirely based around live audio processing, like whole effect moments. We didn't have sound design at all. It was just like, the computer's going to do magical things to a snare drum sound or magical things to a cymbal sound. And it's just going to make sounds cool. But it's like, if this fails, like, we are so screwed. And so that's the year that we bought that redundant computer rig, where it allowed the performer, like, if there were issues, they could have switched to computer B, and like, then we're back up and running. And by God, I remember Josh like saying like, I don't know if it's worth the money to do all this. And we had no issues until finals night. And I remember there was one of the sounds, there was a rim shot the snares hit that was supposed to have like a crazy like resonance off of it. And all of a sudden she hit that sound and went pop. No resonance at all. I was like, oh, that
was the one moment, but it popped right back on after that.
But she did exactly her job. She unplugged the keyboard, pressed the redundant switch, and we were back for the rest of the show.
Wow.
And we ended up meddling that year. Like, so that could have caused us to drop a few places if that thing at that point of the show stopped working. But like, it's the time that you least expect to use it that you're going to need that kind of redundancy and backup.
Yeah. That one shot you're talking about as well, like, it seems silly to think like, oh, that would have maybe changed how things panned out for us for that season. But Mike McIntosh, I think, was, sorry to name drop, but I think he was judging us that year, and that shot happened. He knew there was supposed to be a big resonant thing. He was like, unfortunate. So like
that is so him on the tape.
Isn't it though?
It is, yeah.
Like,
well, but then it made me think about like, well, so everybody knows that we're using the sound processing, this live processing, if it doesn't go according to plan, is our effect less effective if we're still playing at a similar quality? Or it made me, I don't know, I was wondering, like, do we get judged about what people know effects wise our show should be versus what they see and what they hear in the moment?
Right.
Not calling out that one judge, but just interesting.
But see,
and that's part of it. And I think the important thing, because I do a lot of judging as well. I judge out in SCPA a lot in various circuits throughout the U.S. But like the important thing is you do have to judge the show of the night. You're judging the show that's in front of you that day. You really can't, and that can be a thing that changes placements. Things like TV's not working, like that affects GE. The whole reason we have them in the first place is that they affect the effect of the show. And so when those things don't work, guess what? That's part of it. And like that's the risk you take as a group trying some of these more advanced things. And I still remember coming off the floor in 2015 and being so bummed about what happened with the TVs. And like you would think like, oh, well, we had these issues, so like we're not going to use any technology that's really important next year. And then you look at what 2016 was, and like the whole show is built on technology with lights. And so I think the important thing is like, as long as you're doing the work to figure out how to make things consistent and you have your plans and redundancies and all that, then, keep being you, keep doing your thing. And that's what we're going to keep doing for sure.
And I was super proud with, that's why I said, Cinegrove. Because when we were watching them, I was like, oh God, here come the electronic problems. But them kids laid out.
Oh yeah, it was a great run.
I said,
fantastic.
I was like, because I was like, y'all did what you're supposed to do. When something like that happens, y'all still went out there and handed it. So I was like, can't do nothing with them. And I was like, through the whole season with like Gateway, Matrix, I was like, look, if y'all don't come out here and have this stuff working, I'm gonna be mad because the prelim, semifinal stuff wasn't working. It was glitching. I was like, okay, but it is. It's like you said, man. It's a risk. It's a risk. Sometimes it's worth it, but man, when it all like this year for y'all, man, like, I'm not gonna get over it, bro. It's the it's just the like to the T run that you could probably have, and it's hard to get something like that off of a stream. Because I wanted to be out there with Seth, because me and Seth talk about this all the time, and I was like, man, I want to be in the building with y'all, but when you get that kind of a feeling off of a stream, you done something right. Yeah, and I was just like, this is just laying in the pocket. Everything is happening. It's snapping. Lights working. I ain't heard a tinkle. Then the front ensemble hit that first run, and I almost turned everything off in the room. I said, this is ridiculous. I'm not finna do this. I was like, they are not playing today. And then, but that's why I said something.
It was pretty awesome.
But
shout out to the MCM battery this year as well. I felt like our battery was very, very strong, which was good because they were featured a whole lot. A whole lot.
And I think just the juxtaposition between the battery and the front ensemble and how they play so well together. For me, I akin it a lot to what SCV does with their battery and their front. It's a complete unit. It's truly a percussion ensemble and not just the battery against the front ensemble. And I think you guys always do a fantastic job of melding the two and making it work together, because not a lot of groups do that.
Yeah, well, and that's the thing. I'll give Shane props. Like, Shane's still like one of the most musical battery arrangers I've worked with. I mean, like that guy's ears are really great for finding the line of phrase and all these different things. And like the fact that he does the visual stuff too just makes it where like he understands how to build these phrases and connect all these things. But like it still blows my mind, like the number of times where we're at rehearsal and like Shane hears like electronic stuff. I think he hears better than most people that I know. I mean, like if there's a sample missing, like he's the first one to be like, where was that sample? Like where was that thing? And so like he really truly hears all those layers of the onion. And I think that's the reason he writes the way he does battery wise. And there's never a time where I get something back from Shane that I go like, this won't fit with the keyboards. Where like, you get back things from other people. It's like, I don't know if this rhythm makes sense over top of that. I don't know if these things work, but like, there's never that with Shane. He always truly knows how to layer those textures and rhythms together in a very effective way.
Because we did a early season Mystique video of the battery. and we were hearing like little bass licks through some of the stuff, and I was like, dude, this is brilliant stuff, man. And you can hear the melodies and the like you said, man, you can hear the rhythms from the front in the book, and that's what we attest to SCV a lot, man. When you can sing the horn parts and stuff like that, that's crazy. Like, you know, you're doing something right, percussion wise, and it's just not just notes on a page, you know.
Yep.
Matt, I noticed. So, you know, Mystique has a sound, and like, so are there like devices and motives that you'd like to use that maybe that's your get out of jail free card? That's like, all right, I'm in this moment. How do I? Because I know I do. Like, there are like 3 or 4 licks that I use in all of my shows, and my kids make fun of me for it. But there might get out of, you know, if I need to get out of a phrase or get into a phrase, I know I can count on those and those works.
That's a great question. Dean might actually be able to out me a little more than I can.
Dotted quarter notes.
Can you make this rhythm one more time?
No, the front ensemble is not good at playing dotted rhythms, so it's actually really good for us that he writes them like that, because they play them like triplets, or they play them like marching band triplets, where it's duple and then it's triple. It's not, you know, so it's actually good for us. But
the one that I use, it's not one of those that in feature moments I'll use very often, but the one that I go to, and I use it for Mystique sometimes, but it's mainly like high school marching band stuff like that, is if you need to fill up a texture of a moment, the marimbas are playing like a 16th note version of a part of a melody, and the vibes are doing the exact same part in 8th notes. So it just takes twice as long for the vibe part to develop. But like, it just makes everything sound so textured and layered, but it's like literally 2 parts. And actually it's really 1 part, 1 single time, 1 double time. And I use that all the time to create and fill in texture that just feels very active and interesting, without it requiring a lot of, you know, ingenuity to get that same type of texture. But no, I wouldn't say like, we play such varied music with Mystique, you know, whether it be original or like arrangements of like what we did this year or bluegrass. Like, it really just depends on the show. And I think that's one of the reasons, like, I don't really have any go-tos with Mystique as much, because we just tend to play such different stuff year to year. It's hard to throw those stylistic things in. I mean, I will say, if I had Anthony on here with us, I'd say that he'd say that every single drum set fill I write is the same. You know? But it's like they're almost all voiced the exact same way. Because usually I just make a note like, just voice these how you want. But like, if you look at the score, every single drum set fill is kind of voiced the same way.
I always wanted to ask questions like with different groups like that on their style of writing on drum sets, like, how much free range do you give the drum players? Is every single thing written out, or is there like, you'll write a section and then you'll have a space here, and in the music you'll just say, create your own thing, but make sure, like, you know, it's the same thing every time, blah, blah. But like, how much free range are drum set players getting, and how much is actually being written? Because I want to ask at least for Dartmouth that too.
I would say most of us, you know, I don't know Dartmouth specifically because I haven't worked with Tom or that crew in a while. But like, I'd say overall, everybody's is very composed. Usually what I'll allow the performers to do is voice things. So I want the rhythms that are there, and I want the phrasing and dynamics that are there. And like, really what I'm trying to do is show in the part why I wrote what I did. So that sometimes like, it's like, the ride cymbal part is this because it's doubled with the marimba part. You know, it's like, so there's certain things there is flexibility for, and there's a lot of things that there aren't, because it might relate to the battery, or like, it'd be one thing if we were just like a rhythm section with people comping chords and they could do whatever they wanted, but rhythmically there's so much they have to lock into. And so, yeah, it really turns into like big feature moments like Anthony's solo this year. Like, there was a lot more flexibility there, but it was still something that, like, I don't remember if CJ or I did it, but like that initial version was written out. And then it's like, okay, we can alter this a little bit to kind of fit what feels good for you. Since it is a kind of solo, you know, nobody else playing with you moment, there's a little more flexibility in those type of moments. But we still want to lay out the structure, because as great of players, and I'm not talking about Anthony, but as great of players as most of our performers are, like, they're not necessarily top world-class arrangers and composers yet. And so, like, if you just give them like, hey, here's 8 bars, go, they're not writing something that fits into the show.
Gotcha.
And I think that's our goal, is to give a structure that fits in the show, and then let them fill in that structure with things that they're able to do and are comfortable with.
It makes sense.
Y'all are pretty good about putting notes in there too. Like this can be adjusted. This is mostly flash. I need to hear this part. Like y'all will leave things that help us as teachers and them as students as well. So y'all are pretty good about it.
And that goes for keyboard stuff too. It's like, there's a lot of times where, like, remember the end of the show, like sometimes you just want something to look big. And so it's like play the farthest away E and A that you can reach. That's literally what the definition was. It was like, I just put some notes on the page, but like make this look as hard as you can. And so there's a lot of times that we'll have those text explanations of like, this is shaped this way because it looks cool.
Right.
But yeah, overall, we give the performers, like, I don't write a lot of stickings in, for example, for the keyboards, and that's on purpose because they tend to come up with way cooler stickings than I would. Either ones that are more efficient or things that kind of look cool.
Right.
But I think there's a process of discovery. I know it's hard in a single weekend when you're going from like getting music to learning it and not having stickings. But I think that when you really think about the performers having that process of discovery of figuring out what works best for them, like it helps ingrain it better in their brain too. Yeah, exactly. It's not them. Yeah, and I've always said this, and Dean will attest that it's true, I hope. Everyone, like, yes, I'm the front ensemble ranger for Mystique, but like all of these products are all of ours. It's one of those that like I'm just the one who happens to put the first version on the page. Like we do evolve the show, and the staff has a lot of say in like, hey, this isn't working. Let's find something else that works. And same with the members. Like I remember the beginning lick of the show is one of those that like there in person was like, I don't like what I wrote. Like, let's try to figure something out. And it was like kind of me and a few of the members kind of just hacking out things. And like, we kind of ended up with coming up with something that was cool. But the idea of like, it's all of our product. It's Mystique 2024's product, not my product. And we're going to try to work together to find that. I might have the most say in it, or CJ, we have the most say in it because we're the ones who put down the big structure. But like, it is not you play exactly what I told you to play because type of thing. It's, if we feel like there's something better or somebody has an idea, we're gonna listen to that and adjust.
Student ownership is such a huge thing, and people have to remember, like when they go to Mystique or wherever, they're getting an education as well. So allowing them to figure out. I mean, I'll do the same thing. I'll write something on a piece of paper, and half the stuff I write I can't play, but I'll ask. But like, how do we do this? I was like, I don't know, figure it out. And then you two figure out what you want to do, and then because you're the one that's got to play it, I don't have to play it. But they feel like like you said, they feel like they belong to the production process of it. Our whole ballot was taught by rote this year.
Nice.
Yeah, it was pretty cool to watch them interact with each other and like, we should try this here, and Ox folks and stuff like that. And it just gives them that ownership of like, man, we help create this thing that we're sharing with everybody. So I'm glad they get that experience even at a world-class level, because sometimes I think you might have staff that have egos, and like you said, this is what I put on the paper, this is what you're going to do, and the kids are just machines or robots, and they just do what they're told. So it's good to have that organic, kinship between the performers and the composers and stuff. So.
For sure, and it's also just as important as a composer, arranger, to when a student walks up and is like, "Hey, can we play this lick here?" It's like, no. that's just as important as like, no, we're not doing that.
That's the fun part.
And sometimes I'll let them do it, but they'll be like, "That doesn't really fit, does it?" I'm like, "No, it doesn't." But we tried it, and so,
now you know.
Yeah,
I like where your brain's at.
Yeah. Well, one of the interesting, so to kind of on that point, one of the things that we do that really creates that opportunity for the students is like, really the Mystique members have been writing the lot tunes for how long has it been, Dean? Like since 07, 06, 07? Like
I want to say, I think that's about right.
And so there's staff that write tunes, there's members who write tunes, but what it really allows is like they get that creative outlet of getting to. I joke about this all the time. It's like writing for Mystique's like driving a Ferrari. It's like that car will do exactly what you ask it to do. You know, it can handle all that. Like, but you also have to treat it responsibly because it will crash.
Yeah,
You know, because you can play, they can play pretty much anything you want. Like, can we play it in a way that's going to sound good? Maybe not. But also knowing the time we have available, and so like that's one of the coolest things is watching the students figure that part of it out. Is that it's not just about what Sibelius playback sounds like. Is it cool? It's like, you know, is this something that's manageable? You know, can we rehearse in a way that makes this work? You know, like when you start to write parts for like your bass marimbas, like 1 and 6, and like there's nobody else playing with them, but they're trying to play together. It's like, oh, this is hard.
It's
this is hard to do. And so just you kind of learn as young composers and arrangers like what worked and what didn't when you know that the group isn't the issue.
Gotcha.
We'll try to pull those people out as well and let them listen to the piece that they wrote. Like it's hard. So one of the pieces was written by our Cinemarimba Nikolai this year. So it's hard to pull him out when he's the one that's like managing the time and like bringing everybody into it. That's following him, but it's good to bring those people out and be like, watch a run of this, listen to what it sounds like currently. What do you think this needs? What was your intention with writing this? Because you got a vibe line here and a marimba line here. What should we focus on? You know, and like asking those leading questions to kind of help them figure out how to do that better. Because a lot of the times we're hoping those kids will go on and do their own teaching gigs or continue to write or, you know, it's past just rudimental knowledge. It's kind of a next level knowledge that we're trying to like pass on, I guess.
Well, and as you just mentioned, Dean, like giving them opportunity to listen. The other thing that I try to be pretty hardcore about is so many of the people who write these tunes are our keyboard players. But then all of a sudden they send it in. It's like, oh, well, we'll figure out the synth and rack stuff later. It's like, no, you won't. That has to be done right now.
There was a couple times this year that I was like, we're not going to play this weekend unless everybody has parts for it. So if you want to pass out the keyboard stuff, that's fine, but it's not really worth it because we're not going to rehearse it together. Like y'all can hit it in subs for an hour, maybe, but we're not going to rehearse it unless everybody has parts because we've learned that from, I think last year, 2023, where they would pass out some of the tune stuff. The racks don't have anything. The electronics don't have anything. But we don't have show music yet, so we need to kind of rehearse something musically together. So then it's like, well, I don't know. We can't just send them off on their own to do subs. We could. It's more productive to do that. But then if we don't have enough staff members there, is that helpful? So it definitely was better this year on that front where it's like, no, you have to write something for them, first of all. And it doesn't need to be much, but it needs to be something. You can't just be like, fill it in, because then we have issues of, okay, cool, you guys are playing backbeat Chinas, and this is actually a really quiet moment of the show of the tune over here. So that doesn't really work.
Because if you let because our rec players are awesome, but if you let them write their own parts, it's utter chaos.
I believe it.
Our MCM, baby, it's a vibe.
Yeah, because like that was one of my big things kind of when I started writing for Mystique is just making sure that I wasn't just acting like a keyboard arranger, but like every single line, every single stave, when they get the music for the first time, everybody has detailed music at the same level as everybody else. So I might be slower at sending it sometimes, but by God, I guarantee that every stave will be filled in top to bottom. And that everyone has the right level of detail and expectations of what they're going to be doing.
That's really awesome to hear because, like you said, Dean, you know, these kids are going to be the future designers or composers or arrangers for these groups, and so to get that experience and, like you said, have a Ferrari doing it, you know, that's super beneficial because, you know, sometimes people start arranging and they got all these grandiose ideas, but they're writing it for a low-level high school group that can't really do the basics, and they might be a good composer, but the product's just not that there for them. So
exactly,
that's really good.
Yeah, we're hoping that these youngins will end up coming and teaching at some point and continuing to pass it on. That's a big thing at Mystique is the passing of the torch. We don't only have people that are alumni that teach at Mystique, but it is primarily alumni that teach there. So
it's like what 99% alumni.
Yeah, all but
Dan Twyford and then I know the Mosh Pit team now.
Yeah, Natasha and Megan. Those would be the only ones that I can think of that were not alumni. And they're awesome, amazing additions to our crew. So I'm glad that we've got them. But we try to, these kids are good at what they do, and they know what Mystique is, especially if you've done it like 3 or 4 years. You kind of get an idea of what the identity is. Because when I did 2 years, the first year is just like the deer in headlights effect of like, okay, I'm here and I'm not as good as I thought I was. I have to work really, really hard. The second year was like, okay, now I'm an alumni and I have to take the lessons of the first year and try to like set a good example for new people that are coming in, as well as like give a good show to the audience and do all my responsibilities. When you get to year 3 or 4, I feel like it's, you're thinking about things at like a different level. It's about like trying to like live the, I guess, ideals or personality of Mystique in all of your reps. So yeah, hoping that they can like continue to take that forward and do that either with us or with somewhere else, but passing on those lessons I think is important.
That's awesome.
Good stuff, man.
We could talk for like 7 hours, but
Listen,
one last question from me. So Dean, I kind of know a little bit about yours, but Matt, who was your inspiration kind of to get into this? Or it could be a person, it could be a group or whatever, but like what kind of spurred you to be like, I think I want to do this?
From an arranging standpoint, I mean, one of my longtime mentor figures is Eric Johnson, who was the front ensemble ranger prior to me at Mystique. I kind of grew up in high school, really enjoying what the Cavaliers, were doing at the time, kind of in the early 2000s. And I just was really lucky enough that Eric started writing for Mystique and starting in 2003. And so I got to be around Eric all the time with that. And then I also auditioned and became the timpanist for the Cavaliers in 2003 as well. So I was kind of working 2 groups with Eric. And what I love is that it doesn't really work this way anymore for a whole show. I mean, like kind of what I was talking about, we do kind of compose in front of the members at times. But I remember so much of what my learning and development process was like as an arranger was watching Eric write in real time. He would be in front of the group trying to figure out like a new lick for a section. And when I was lucky that I was the timpanist, I wasn't having to like learn all that and shred all these notes. Like when Eric all of a sudden had a chance to like hack and like write some stuff, like everyone else was like taking their break because they were tired. And I was like really taking an opportunity to be focused and kind of pay attention. Like, what are the things that are going through his head? Because when you have somebody like, no, I have 4 bars in this harmonic progression, you can see the things they go to first in their head, like just as you're kind of hacking and improving on on certain things. So I kind of learned Eric's thought process through watching him in real time over multiple years of doing things, which was super cool. And so really at that time, I was also starting to write for high schools. I was writing for high schools, and weirdly enough, in Tampa, Florida. I had a number of schools I was writing for in Tampa, even though I lived in Nashville. And then started writing for some schools in Nashville. Ended up starting to write with Shane this was the predecessor of Synced Up, where like Shane and I were doing some indoor shows together because Eric would write Mystique and he'd write Cavaliers, but that's all he was really doing from a writing standpoint. So I started taking on some of that responsibility of like A-class groups with Shane and like really kind of more basic level things. And then kind of over time, I just wrote enough with enough different people. And when Shane got the offer to be the caption head at Phantom Regiment, where he was arranging as well, Eric was still writing for Cavaliers at the time. So I became like the obvious choice, since I was writing so much with Shane, to take over and write at Phantom. So wrote with Shane in Phantom 11 through 13. And then in 14 took over when Eric decided to leave Mystique, retire from Mystique after 11 years. That's when I ended up taking over for Mystique. So it's been a kind of long process where it started out me arranging wise, just doing something to make some money while I was in college, just working with local high schools and everything. But it really kind of turned into another half of my life that's kind of separate from all the stuff I do on the concert side at the university level.
That's interesting.
Nice.
It's funny how everybody in the game has a different way of getting into it and different inspirations, and always interesting to hear. So, yeah.
But no, Eric's been a mentor. I mean, still to this day, Eric's a mentor. Before I make any big life decisions, I'm calling and talking to Eric Johnson. Mm-hmm. Almost anything. He's, definitely been a mentor figure in my life for 20 something years. So yeah, definitely Eric.
It's good to have those people, man. I know. Anytime I get a chance to give them flowers, I try to. But I know Terry Sanders is kind of that for me. He showed me like, you can do this, and you don't have to look like everybody else and sound like everybody else. And I was like, all right, I can do this.
Yeah, Terry's good peeps. He's awesome
for sure. Will, you got any final questions or thoughts or comments or whatever?
Like you said, man, this turned into like 4-hour podcast. We all, but no, all the good stuff came out, man. Yeah, it's definitely just good, just seeing everybody, hearing the stories, getting to talk about things, and just music in general. So, yeah.
So, I Dean, you always welcome anytime. We can talk about whatever.
All the time.
Man, I'd like to pick your brain about maybe do an episode on just how we talk about designing and setting up stuff. Or
Sure.
Your time with Blue Coats, because I know those are, while they're kind of the same, they're kind of different.
Oh yeah, so totally different, and our processes couldn't be more different either. And both in very positive ways. What we aim to do with Mystique and what we aim to do with Blue Coats, and how we get to those end results are very different. But that's the fun part, is getting to experience that variety of method, and it's
There's
fun.
more than one way to skin a cat, and those are the reasons.
That part.
Those are the reasons why I like those two groups in particular, because like let's figure out a different way to do it this time. And it's something to be said for that, especially it's very easy to find a formula. I know people hate that word, but it's very easy to find a formula and just keep doing the formula. But it's something else to reinvent yourself without reinventing yourself. I think you keep your core, you keep your core intact, but you change the outside of it. So.
Invest in your personal development.
Exactly.
Yes.
Fantastic way to put that. So, but yeah, let us know in the comments down below what you thought about everything. If you have any questions for these guys, we can shoot it to them and all that good stuff. You can find us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. You can also listen to our podcast on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. So, for me and Dean and Will and Matt, this has been Cedric. This has been another episode of On the Backhash Perc Talk. Thank you guys for joining us so much, and you'll be seeing these guys again, I'm sure. So you guys take care and peace out.
Well, holla.
Bye.
Later.